Lord be with you. In baptism, Allan died with Christ. May he now rise with him to everlasting glory. My name is Father McGill, a retired Air Force Catholic Colonel Chaplain, and I'm very happy to be invited to be here. We know that Easter is such a great feast that it cannot be contained in just one day with Easter bunnies and Easter lilies and chocolate candy and eggs and so forth. Easter is such a big feast, it's called the Great Sunday, and it stretches for 50 days all the way to the eve of Pentecost, so we can look and think and enjoy the fact that you're bringing Allan here during the Easter season. And I think now, with the Easter candle burning, the Paschal candle, and these candles burning, there will be the lighting of another family candle of St. Joseph, and then there will be endearing words of remembrance, no second collection, and then there will be eventually the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, and then the recessional, and we will go to the grave and bless the grave in our Easter journey. So now I will ask you, dearest family, to come forward for the lighting of the candle, the words of remembrance, and then the prayer of St. Francis.
My name is Nico. I'm going to light a candle for Allan.
Allan would be pleased that family and friends alike are joined together here today in his name. Allan dearly loved people, and like most of us, treasured those moments when you know people love you. But he would be pleased for another reason. Allan was, among other things, a thinking and feeling person who reflected on the meaning of life, not just in cosmic and philosophical terms, but in the day-to-day sense in which it is lived and experienced. And so I am not here to tell you of his many accomplishments, which most of us already know, but just to tell you some stories that shaped our lives. I met Allan 58 years ago at Laredo Air Force Base in Laredo, Texas. On the very same day, we were both processing onto the base to fulfill our tour of duty. At the time, the base was used primarily for pilot training. With so many young officers and airmen assigned to the base, housing became a big factor. As a result, most singles were assigned to a simple room with few amenities. Hence, the club became the diner and areas to relax and socialize. In our club room, we had a separate room called the game room. It was large, quiet, and mostly inhabited by the older crowd. Hence, the younger crowd shied away from it. However, Allan did not. When he came into the club, he would grab a beer and go straight into the game room. It was then, when the game room was closed for renovation, that Allan came into the main area to dine and socialize. It was an evening when we were all in line at the snack bar. Allan was in line just behind me. We got our snacks, joined a group at a large table. I then said to Allan, "What is the attraction that draws you to that game room, as it is mostly used by old retired soldiers?" And his answer was, "I can't learn anything sitting around talking to a young bunch of kids. The people in the game room," referring to the old retired soldiers, "are full of war stories and history." Well, you know, I sat up, bowed my back, apparently angry in my response. I said to him, "Well, when I walk into this club, I don't feel I'm walking into an institution for higher learning. I'm here for whatever my needs require on my off-duty time." He knew his comments did not sit well, so he went on to talk about the retired soldiers he befriended. He said some even fought in the American-Mexican War, and the stories they told of their personal experiences you cannot find in history books. I had to listen to this for the whole evening. But that evening was the beginning of our friendship that lasted 58 years. For the next 2 years of our tour in Laredo, Allan and I spent almost all our off-duty time together. But when I received my orders for my next assignment to an isolated tour in Iceland and would need to depart in 2 or 3 weeks, that same day, Allan called me to tell me he would be away for the weekend as he was taking a training flight with one of his students and would be back early Sunday. I told him of my next assignment. The phone went dead. He did not respond, so I felt he was okay with the news. He got back early Sunday. He called me, and of course asking all kinds of questions. I had no answers. But even though we spent most of our off-duty time together for the past 2 years, the subject of engagement and marriage never came up with either of us. It was then, the orders, that we realized we had to make a decision. A lot of discussion and really no time for planning. We both felt we were to be together for the rest of our lives. So we arranged with the city courthouse to be married by the Justice of Peace the day before I left for Iceland. After returning to the United States from my tour in Iceland, we spent 2 more years in the United States. Then Allan received an assignment to Japan. This assignment was one of the highlights of his career. But even more importantly, his time in Japan led to a deep understanding of Japanese culture and friendship that continue to this day. In Japan, exploring the area was limited, as we were both in demanding positions. This wasn't easy. I was frequently on call because the Vietnam War was in process, and most injured were sent to our base hospital for care. However, when we could, we jumped into our little Beetle Volkswagen and would drive to nearby towns. At this time, Allan's Japanese was getting so good that he could read all the road signs and converse with the Japanese we met on the way, which allowed us to be even more adventurous and independent. However, on one of our drives to Tokyo to attend an afternoon play, an accident, construction downtown, forced us to reroute to the countryside, where there were no road signs. We drove around for hours. Finally made it back into town. Allan noticed this big, beautiful building surrounding grounds and asked if he could stop and explore it. Well, I let him go in. I just wanted to get home. He was in that building for over 2 hours. When he came out, he had a big grin on his face and a package under his arm. He then told me he enrolled in college classes, and that building was Sophia University, run by the Jesuit priests. Well, Allan continued to take courses until our tour was up. And although he did not get a diploma, he got a beautiful certificate with the transcripts of all his accomplishments at the university. And to his last day, he cherished that certificate, I think even more than his college degrees and diplomas he received. Allan's interest in Japan led him to employment and consulting opportunities with a Japanese firm after he retired from the military. After he left the firm, he continued his correspondence with his Japanese coworkers and friends. And in his computer, the very last letter he wrote was to a friend in Japan. And the very last correspondence he received was from a Japanese coworker and a friend with a birthday card and a gift. It arrived on his birthday in May. He never got to read the card or see the gift. Soon after Allan retired from the military and his civilian employment, it was then he devoted his time to volunteer work. And one of his most satisfying assignments was volunteer at the Alexandria Seaport Foundation. This appealed to him, as the organization's efforts are to change the lives of young men and women by giving them life and career skills to become independent and productive adults through the arts and science of boat building. On one of Allan's volunteer days, it was around 7:30 p.m., Allan was not home, very unusual. When I called the shop, he said he could not talk and he would call me when he got home. And here is the story he told me. He said he went into the shop that day, it was normal, that the staff, the volunteers, and the apprentice would all be working on either a major project or one that would have several small projects going on. But on this day, one of the apprentices was off to the side doing something with a piece of wood. Allan knew this apprentice fairly well and asked him what his project was. He did not respond. He just went on tinkling with that piece of wood. Allan went back several times, asking him the same questions. No response. And because this apprentice was doing so well in the program and not far from graduation, Allan became concerned and suggested that he seek out his counselor for help. Then the apprentice said to Allan that he was sad and just needed to be left alone, as his grandmother had just passed away and that they had buried her the previous day. He went on to tell Allan that his grandmother raised him, his brothers, cousins, and that she worked 24/7, 7 days a week cleaning houses so they could all have a place to stay. He then said she was the only one he wanted to be at his graduation, and now she won't be there. And then he said with tears in his eyes, they did not even have enough money to put a headstone on her grave. With that, Allan, pointing to the nearby trash woodpile, said to the apprentice, let's nail and glue a couple pieces of wood. Put her name on it and make a grave marker until you can get a headstone marker. The apprentice lit up, and then he went over to the trash pile himself. He picked out 2 long pieces of wood and asked Allan if he could have them. Allan said yes, as it was all trash, ready to pick up. Allan noticed the apprentice was wearing a silver cross around his neck. This cross was a cross his grandmother gave him. He took it off, and with the apprentice having just completed his math course, calculated the size of the wood so the dimensions would be the same as the cross he was wearing. They proceeded to cut, sand, paint, and even engrave her name on the cross. Allan said it was a masterpiece of art when it was completed. It was time to go home, and the young apprentice was looking for paper to wrap up the cross to take home on the bus. But instead, Allan drove him home. While driving, the boy told Allan that he and his cousins were going to clean up the gravesite and would plant the cross until they could get the money to buy a headstone. Allan came home that evening drenched. He sat at the edge of the bed and said to me, I have seen so many happy people in my day, but never have I seen anything like this. It was a moment he treasured, knowing that he helped the young apprentice through a very difficult time in his life. The next day, I came home from work. In our foyer, there were 2 big bags of grass seed. Allan was in the kitchen preparing our dinner. I said to him, have you lost it? We have a brick patio. And then he told me They were for the boy's grandmother's gravesite, and I can assure you all, there is a headstone put on that grave. Another thing that Allan was very devoted to, the American Legion. Allan, it was one day while Allan was at the American Legion Club, the commander posted a sign asking for donations for the post baseball team. I could not believe what he saw, so he inquired about the team and said, yes, the Post has a baseball team, and it was sponsored by donations from members of Post 24, Alexandria, Virginia. So Allan came home and wrote a substantial check for the baseball team. Of course, I said, gee, that's a lot for a donation to a baseball team. And then he told me the story when he was younger and wanted to play baseball. He said you had to buy your own uniform and equipment to join the team. For Allan, being the oldest of 4 boys, buying uniforms and equipment to play baseball was out of the question. Way too expensive, but that's true even today. So one day when Allan was riding his bike, he went by the baseball field and he saw 2 teams playing. All the kids were his age, 12 to 14 years old. He sat and watched. When the manager came over to Allan and said to him, would you like to play? Allan said, I can't. I don't have a uniform. And the manager said to him, if you promise to come to practice and come to the games, we will give you a uniform and equipment. Allan made that promise and got to play baseball. He later learned he was playing for an American Legion post that was sponsored by members of the American Legion in that area. He then said to me he could never forget that moment of playing baseball that brought him so much joy and satisfaction. And would you believe, the very last check Allan wrote was March 16, 2018, was a donation to the American Legion Post 24 baseball team. I'm going to end with something that Allan was especially proud of, and that is his service to the country in Vietnam. Allan was well known for his standout military career, but I would like you to know how he combined his military service with compassion to others. Allan went to Vietnam as a commander of a rescue helicopter squadron. And he would say his assignment in Vietnam was the most rewarding and one that he found profound satisfaction, even in a dark place. Allan loved flying, and he especially loved flying helicopters. He volunteered for the helicopter mission because he saw the helicopter as a friendly machine where he could help out in desperate situations. Allan, being so sensitive, knew the difference between life's little pains and those that hurt and leave indelible scars. And it's something he and his troops witnessed daily as they went on rescue missions. I heard Allan say he waited day and night for his phone to ring just to go out on a mission to rescue, be it a soldier, a member of the popular force, or a civilian. He said it transcended into a life bearable of feeling, and that even in the shadow of despair, he knew he was there for the purpose of saving lives and providing hope. Allan and his crew members were frequently in harm's way, helicoptering into war zones to rescue wounded troops surrounded by enemy forces. We all knew it was dangerous and stressful, but I never wavered or worried about his assignment. I knew he was up to the challenge. When Allan returned from Vietnam, I knew his assignment took its toll on him. He lost a lot of weight and needed rest in the evenings. I passed it off as he needed some rest and recuperation after a year in Vietnam. However, this was not the case. He got the results from his physical examination a month after returning from Vietnam. His flight surgeon commented to him that he has never seen such a reaction that he developed from his time test, in that it encapsulated his entire forearm. Unforeseen and unheard of, he was immediately placed on antibiotic therapy for the next year, along with limited physical activity. I then asked Allan, how could this have happened? As I thought being on a base with only military personnel and little contact with others, he would be protected. He then told me this story. He and his crew went on a mission to rescue the troops. When they landed, the Vietnamese civilians all came out of the woodwork and literally crawled onto the helicopter until it was fully packed. He said he did not have the heart to turn any of them away, as they were also trapped and injured trying to escape the enemy. Many of them were women, children, some so sick, coughing up blood and vomiting, all crying. So he took as many as he could and tried never to leave any behind, and sometimes even going back into hostile areas to be sure all were rescued. With a helicopter having such little space, and even though Allan and his crew members' health were in jeopardy by this decision, he said he would not have done it differently. Allan always viewed his military overseas assignment as an opportunity to show the local people the heart and compassion of the American military. Nobody represented the integrity of the U.S. military better than Allan. I just had a kick under the table. I know what that means. Allan's telling me I talk too much. So I will conclude. Allan reached his final resting place here in beautiful Arlington Cemetery, where American heroes are laid to rest. My goal today was not to recognize Allan's many accomplishments, but to share my recollection of Allan as an honorable son, a brother, loving husband, a loving and caring uncle, a loyal friend, a generous and patriotic citizen, and a compassionate human being. Allan would always say, "I'm the luckiest guy in the world," but I think we are even luckier to have known and loved Allan. And now, a prayer.
This is the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I might not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love, for it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Thank you, dearest family. And now, on this Easter day, may we take your hero and your love to his place of rest.
your attentions to the band. Your commander. Feel free to take advantage of the seat. And for those of you standing, you can come in and stand directly behind the second row of chairs. Welcome, everyone.
Dearest family, we bless Allan's eventual and yon grave as a sign of Christ's resurrection. What a beautiful scene. Isn't that beautiful? We bless the eventual and yon grave as a sign of Christ's resurrection. In the name of the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, now and forever. Amen. Eternal rest granted to him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May he rest in peace. May his soul and the souls of the faithful and departed, in the mercy of God, rest in peace. And may your love soar on eagle's wings to touch the face of God. Hallelujah.
Family, off in the distance, to your right is the firing party. They will fire 3 volleys. Please stand as military honors are ready.
President of the United States Air Force, and a grateful nation. Please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service.
Let me first present them to you, and then I will. What I'd like to do is present these to you on behalf of the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, President of the United States, and a grateful nation for your beloved, honorable, and faithful service to our country, and to you for standing beside me. Place this here for safekeeping.
Thank you.
Now, the final resting place is there where you see the greens at, just in the corner. And I'll go over and walk over and show you where the actual grave will be. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And you're welcome to join me, or you can stay here.
Where is it?
Where you see the greens. It's quite a distance.
We'll just stay here.
Okay, and I'll walk over and show you where it is.
Okay.
When I come back, and then we can place the roses, and then I'll show you the way to the reception.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to stand by the grave.
Allan took care of all of the funerals in our family. And I don't know whether they get bent out of shape because they didn't.
Oh, Allan did great. Allan, for those sons, and for all he did for that family.
Yeah.
bless your party and make sure everyone knows the way to the reception, okay? And then we'll form a line to place the roses. The question to ask is whether you would like to be the first to place or the last. To be the first, okay. So I just don't.
You want me to do it now?
Let me address everyone first. Gruer family and friends, at this time, you may come forward to place a rose on the casket as you prepare to transition to the reception at the Officers Club. And at this time, I will form a line to place roses, beginning with Miss Gruer. Thank you so much for coming. It was my honor to escort you for services honoring your beloved Colonel Gruer. Thank you so much.
Actually, this is one of my favorite spots here. It is. It's a beautiful spot. Love it. Thank you. Here's some rose.
I think I could do it.
Actually, isn't this the rainiest month of April? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk. Yep.
proceeding back to the vehicles. You can come in and close. How do you copy?
Thank you for being here, by the way. You did very nice job. What is this?
This is Eisenhower.
This is Eisenhower.
This is 12A. Yes. But the headstone will be placed on fair about 90 days from today. Or you just go to the website. And type in his name. Excuse me. On the website, there's a tab called Find a Grace. You see a picture of him.
Oh, great.
Yes. Yeah, and on the website, it'll tell you the actual grade numbers of the section. Romeo 26, Garfield closing at 10:45 on 12A. I'm complete. I'm returned to their vehicles. You can come on in. How do you copy?
Copy, Rob.
To be honest with you, I don't know anything about it. I'm not sure. I don't really. She just came out of the hospital. Bad. There was no exercise. She got a good doctor.
Living so close to mom,
Yeah.
sure you really want to. Food really in Raleigh, but actually really good. Nice little area, it's really foodie. Our triangle.
Yeah.
So a kind of exotic.
Oh gosh, that's right, a long time ago, yeah.
My dad was like, got rid of it. He's like, we're all going to Marley. And then, I agree with you.
With Montgomery County or Chevy Chase?
Princess Street on St. Paul.
What's her name?
Well, they are because
Right after college.
Your dad.